Now I start with the sonate. The sonate are the greaves. I go from bottom to top, more or less. And the sonate are the little greave parts that I take off the display. I have them tied on because my son and vacuum cleaners knock them over sometimes. So the top lace is wrapped around the hadate, the thigh guards, and more or less I just untie the bow tie that's there and I tie them around my shins. And it's pretty easy. They tie on the top and on the bottom. They wrap around your legs. I would encourage you, if you have like soccer padding or something like that, historically there might have been some pads or something that you wore underneath or some thick cloth. I found that soccer shin guards are not a bad way to go, or if I double it up or wear like thicker socks or something like that that pull over my shins. Mostly the little greave area around the bottom where it touches my foot or could touch my foot is a little bit uncomfortable, and also where you tie it above your calf can be a little uncomfortable if you're talking about wearing it for hours and walking miles kind of thing. As like a walk around a party kind of thing, it's not so bad. But anyway, this is where I tie it. I tie it on just there. It's fine over my sweatpants, but thicker padding may be appropriate if you find yourself chafing in those areas. From there, I move up to the hadate. So the hadate are thigh guards, and actually before I put that on, I tie the obi. So the obi is what's displayed on the outside of the samurai armor, but this padded belt rests on your hips, and I tie it more or less on my hips. The do, the armor, the cuirass thing sits on that and keeps it from digging into your hips. So if you're wearing samurai armor and you're not wearing the kind of padded belt underneath your armor, that may be why it doesn't feel very good. It helps rest some of the weight on your hips, and it also keeps the metal edges from poking into your sensitive bits. But I tie the obi on. Sometimes I'll tie it over the hadate, but if I tie it under, then I find that I can kind of wrap the hadate around it and weave it behind me a little bit, so it's more or less stuck in place, and I find that it doesn't jostle so much if I do it under the hadate, which is then what I put on the thigh guards. That's more or less just a belt that you tie around yourself, and the hadate sit on you there. Now, these don't have any strands that tie around your thighs, so they flap around as you walk around, but this is conceivably a thing that historically might have been there, or something that maybe you want to ask Romance of Men to put on your armor, is something to tie it to your thigh so that it doesn't kind of bounce around and flap around. It'll keep you from making so many noises as you move about whatever you're doing while you're wearing your armor. The next part I do is the kote, the arm pieces, and this is where I need to phone a friend. So I slide the sleeve over my arm, and then there are two strands where I can tie it, and this is where I need some help. Now, it's something you can do yourself, but it's not particularly comfortable to do it yourself. My shoulders arch in if I do it, and it moves around, and I don't find it's as snug as it could be if my wife comes over and helps me tie it. So both kote slide on just like a large glove, and then there are two strands on either side of it, two laces that go around your chest, and you tie them, and they just more or less rest on the side of you. If you're doing it yourself, though, you might end up tying it more towards the front of you, and that's also okay. I just don't find that it rests as well unless it's tied by somebody else, which is where you need to phone a friend. Speaking of phoning a friend, putting the do on is also helpful to have somebody nearby. Again, you can do it yourself, but it's just helpful to have somebody else. In this particular case, I kept the sode, the shoulder pads, on already. Trying to put those on yourself, not a particularly fun thing. So if you attach them, which is just done with this little horn piece, it slides through a loop, and then they're stuck on there. They also move around, and some of the lacing on the kote may be there to help keep those sode in place. I don't really attach them, so there are some loose laces there, but I digress. The point is I have the sode, the shoulder pads, on the do, on the cuirass piece already. I more or less slide it on. I kind of fit myself in the side. It opens from one end. You slide your arm through and then kind of get the shoulder straps, kind of like you're trying to put on a backpack, over your shoulders, and then with some help, my wife kind of hangs on to one side so it stays stable. If you're doing this, it helps to like sit down or have like part of the cuirass resting on a shelf, so you're not trying to fumble around with so much weight. But anyway, one of these little horn loops goes through. It's easier then to get the second one in, and the kote is there. Then it's tying one side. Again, this helps if you have a hand. I'm not particularly flexible in that way. If you are, then it may be easier to get these side bits tied so that they're together. My wife helps me with that as well. The final piece that I put on is the kabuto, the helmet, and I recently learned how to tie them. So if I pull the little strands down, I can get these little loops that come down, and then I can feed underneath and tie it underneath and over my chin, and it's basically what keeps the helmet on. Before, I was just tying the strands around my neck, and that was that, and the helmet would move around. But on the bottom of the helmet, or if you turn the helmet upside down, you'll see that this rope kind of wraps around you. You pull it down so it makes two little loops, and then you can feed those between underneath your chin and then bring it forward and tie it if you want. So that creates a much more secure feeling on my head. It doesn't move around despite the weight on the helmet. And the Mempo, the face cover, I don't put that on because I don't think it's particularly comfortable. But you can put it on, and there's little bits to tie it in with the rope apparatuses there, and then it covers your face. But I like to be able to breathe and whatnot, and so I don't find myself using it that much. It's easy enough to take on and put off, though, if you're into that kind of thing. Taking it off is more or less that in reverse. I untie the helmet, I set it off to the side, then I untie the dough and open it up from the side and take it off with the sode and the shoulder pads and everything. I get the little hook so I can kind of pry myself out of it. I set that off to the side. I can easily enough get the ties for the kote, the arm guards, and I pull those off like you would a glove. From there, it's just more or less untying the hadate, the thigh pads, undoing the obi, taking off the greaves, setting it there, and then putting it all back up on display when you're done. So it's not a bad thing to do necessarily, because this one needed a bit of dusting. Everyone's a little nervous to test it or to touch it. So it could need to be taken down to have some dusting and whatnot done anyway. But the basic gist is that it comes off reasonably easily. I have a lot easier time getting out of it than I do getting into it. And then putting it up on display is another whole ball of wax. And I have a video on that already if you're interested on how to put it on display. I'll link that as well in the description down below. And that's it. That's how I put on samurai armor. And again, you saw me just putting it over a t-shirt and sweatpants. I find that in cold, if I wear a hakama, which is kind of like chaps, if you will, but a few more layers and a gi, I was fine walking around in sub-zero temperatures actually for quite a while in this. It's reasonably warm. If I was wearing this out where it's hotter, I would probably want to go with something much lighter, a light shirt or something like that, because the armor adds a fair bit of weight, so you're going to be hot carrying it around, but also the silk and stuff and spots where it covers you adds a little bit of heat as well. So keep that in mind as you're wearing it. Anyway, that's all I've got. I've got a review. I've talked about this armor already. Hopefully putting it on is helpful. And if you want to know more, again, check out the channels I recommended in the beginning of the video. That's all I've got. Cheers, and thanks for watching.